Dr. Cam here. Type 2 diabetes and the low-fat diet. They're like two peas in a pod, and not in a good way. Did you know that your low-fat diet could be the main cause of the diabetes that you're currently suffering with? The way that you're eating? So let's talk about that. To go through this in a little more detail, let's go over and look at some slides. All right, so what does type 2 diabetes have to do with a low-fat diet? Well, it all goes back to 1958. There was a researcher named Ansel Keys, and he published a study called the 7-Country Study, which basically set the tone for all of our nutritional guidelines for the next 50 years, right up until this day. The problem is, it was a flawed study, and research has sort of debunked this study over the years, but they've never actually changed our diet. So it caused the formulation of what's called the diet heart hypothesis. And this hypothesis has the potential to be the greatest nutritional disaster of the 20th century. We're talking some pretty huge problems caused by it. Now, because of the way that diet plays out, we've come out with this nice diabetic diet. So what the diabetic diet is, it's a high carbohydrate, low fat, moderate protein diet. Now, the reason it's low fat is, according to that diet heart hypothesis, it's fat that kills you. It plugs up your arteries. It's like the drain going out from your house. If you pour grease down there, it plugs it right up. So it's going to plug up your arteries, cause heart disease. So you can't eat fat. Fat is bad. In order to survive, though, you need calories for your cells to make energy. So you have to eat something. So in this diet plan, as you can see, there's bread and other cereals and potatoes, which are all grains. Everything in here, starches and grains, will turn into sugar in your blood. So this increases blood glucose, some of them very quickly, some of them more slowly, but all of this turns into sugar. Fruit and vegetables, all of the fruit pretty much produces a fairly large amount of sugar. Some of the vegetables do, but not all of them. A lot of them don't necessarily elevate blood sugar that much because they're not as high in carbohydrate. Milk and dairy foods, a lot of those contain lactose. Sugar turns into glucose in your blood. Food containing fat and sugar, that's going to turn into glucose in your blood. And of course, the meat, fish, and alternatives, those tend to be higher in fat, which don't elevate your blood sugar really at all. And protein as well in there. Now, over the decades, if you eat this way for a long period of time, every time you consume these breads, cereals, all those kinds of delicious, tasty things that we tend to love in our society, it elevates your blood sugar. When that happens, your body produces insulin. Insulin is required in order for that sugar to get into your cells. So insulin is the key to opening glucose channels in your cells. So it's the only way that glucose can get in there. So insulin opens up the door, glucose goes into your cells. The problem is when you eat that way for a long time, decades, then we begin to develop what's called carbohydrate intolerance. Now, not everyone does, but certainly a good percentage of us, when we consume mostly carbohydrate in our diet and we burn mostly carbohydrate as our energy, we become carbohydrate intolerant. So the cells begin to adapt to having higher insulin levels. So the key doesn't work as well in those receptors, and the door doesn't open. So that glucose tends to stay in the bloodstream, not get into the cells. And the cells need energy. They're starving, they're hungry, they're sending signals. You're hungry, you're eating, your blood glucose goes up, but the insulin that's being produced doesn't open up the cell very well because the cell has become insulin resistant. Now, the last ones to do these are fat cells. So this glucose can get into your fat. You get centripetal obesity. You get a tubby belly really easily. It's actually, people call it a beer gut, a beer belly. Really what it is it's an insulin roll. It's where the insulin has caused that sugar to be absorbed into those fat cells.
There's no time to borrow. Today is a good day.
So we have our high carb diet, which leads to insulin resistance. So we have high blood glucose because that insulin can't get the glucose into the cell. So your body produces more insulin. So you have high insulin levels. The insulin receptors become more resistant. When that happens, that glucose can't enter your cells get hungry, you have high glucose levels, high insulin levels, and it gets stored as fat instead of being used by your cells, and you're hungry. So you get insatiable hunger and cravings. And what are you supposed to eat? More carbs, and which leads to more insulin resistance. And so you develop this circle, and this cycle completes itself over and over and over again. Now the challenge comes in how we deal with this. So in North America, the answer is to go on a drug. So you can take a pharmaceutical, which is going to increase your insulin sensitivity a little bit for a while, help bring your blood sugar down for a while. But you don't change your diet, you keep eating the same way, you're still in this cycle. Well, now you're going to need more of that drug. And then you're going to keep eating this way, and you're going to need more of that drug. And then you develop type 2 diabetes so severe that you begin to have symptoms. So now you've got numbness, tingling, and burning in your feet, and you're starting to develop some kidney issues and some retina issues, but you're still told this is the only way you can eat, because if you eat fat, you will die almost instantly. And the challenge is that the research doesn't show that when you look at the research. As a matter of fact, a recent study in the fall of 2018 showed that by changing your diet, ignoring the guidelines for type 2 diabetes eating, and changing how you eat, reversed type 2 diabetes in over 60% of the people in the study. So you could totally change this. You don't have to continue on this path. You can stop the damage and start turning it around. So did you catch that? So this diet, the way it's currently set up, if you become type 2 diabetic and you follow the diabetic diet to the T, the best research indicates that 0.1% of the time you will be able to stop your diabetic tendencies and reverse type 2 diabetes. If you change your diet and eat much lower carb 60% of the time. So 60% of the time, it's unbelievable you can stop and reverse type 2 diabetes. So I guess we get to decide, do we want to go with the system that works 0.1% of the time, or the system that works 60% of the time? I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I know which one I would choose. The biggest takeaway from this is there is so much hope for you to stop this damage and reverse it. So I see lots of patients with diabetic neuropathy. If you can stop type 2 diabetes, guess what happens to diabetic neuropathy? It gets better. That's why this is part of the foundation step of the training that I go through with all of my patients, and why all of you need to know this information. Want to know more? Visit my website at neurowellness.co, or you can poke around more of these videos here on this site. I'm Dr. Cam. Thanks for watching. The goal of NeuroWellness is to help you heal your neuropathy. If you found this video helpful, make sure you click subscribe down below and click the little bell to be notified of when there's a new video.